Here's this agile thing with Mike Markey and Matt Beam and also Jeff Singleton.
You said architects shared across teams is okay.
I did.
Developers, yeah, but developers shared across teams and equals not okay.
I said that, yes.
And so there's implications to that between, because I'm talking to people about stream-aligned teams versus platform teams.
Now that view of okay, not okay tends to be because the pool of available architects, in my experience, tends to be very small. Like they don't have a 1-for-1 distribution of they couldn't put an architect on every team. And so by necessity, if you want architectural input, you've got to divide that time. And so there have been places that we've worked before where we've taken this concept of a core team and an extended team. And the core team is the people who work day to day on the team. That's who you really think of as the team members. And then the extended team are those influential people who are not there all the time, who hopefully aren't going to become bottlenecks or pinch points for decisions. They're there when the team needs them, but they're also there when the other teams need them too.
So the core team is pretty clear. It's the people that are dedicated to the probably Scrum team.
And we want those people to be
team,
100% dedicated, right?
100%. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
The extended team members come in and out of the core team. They're not a core team member. They don't spend all their time there. They belong on some other team, typically.
Yeah, they're on call. Yeah. I like thinking of them as on another team, like a team of architects or a team of, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a team of architects. It's just if you haven't done anything else for them, at least cluster them together in a team of architects. I think SAFE would do that.
Right? Yeah, well, they would do shared services. It's just interesting. So that extended team, like, what does that team look like where they sit most of their time or their primary allegiance or
yeah, sitting is
alignment is too.
Yeah, I think align's probably a better word since sitting implies physical presence.
Right. Yeah. I just wondering if you think of architecture as a service or as a platform that the teams sit on top of, because I'm hearing a lot of team topologies talk in the past few years, and just strikes me as another reflection of that pattern.
Well, this is just one man's opinion. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's probably.
Okay. So if we've got a pool of shared resources, people, we could call them.
They're not
well,
testers.
see, I'm actually talking about capabilities here. I'm not talking necessarily about individuals. So we've got a capability that you need to provide to the team in one way or another, whether it's somebody who's an enterprise architect, and there's only generally one or two of those things, right? But they bring a certain level of scrutiny to the work that isn't necessarily represented, especially in a matrix hierarchical organization that has not yet been doing Agile for very long. They haven't distributed the knowledge yet. So they still have a knowledge tree, if you will. I just made that up. So it's a knowledge tree, right? The best knowledge at the top, then it filters down. Then that's presuming that
Is that like thought leadership?
Could be.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Follow my thought.
So, so you've got to figure out how to get that skill set to the team. If there's just one team, you got no problem. But if you got more than one team,
I guess what I was thinking about is it sounds like a platform. It sounds like architecture as a product for a platform team. Okay. Because you can't, it would be if it's a small team or maybe the whole company is just based on one tech team. You can roll your own architecture in that case, right? But for any size organization, you probably want you need to cap the risks around security and governance and regulatory stuff. And so you need some consistency on how that stuff is done. And so you could think of the enterprise architecture team as a platform team, and they provide the internal product of architecture as a product. So, the security, the data, warehousing, and all that stuff, the platform team will take care of that. That's where the architects sit, and you can pull that stuff in a self-service model.
Okay, so you're thinking a cross-functional platform team with lots of different roles on it.
I'm thinking of
Sounds
a
like.
platform team that provides something as a service that you could think of as an internal product that the Streamline teams would use as the basis for their work. Yeah.
I will say this, there are some organizations that have overloaded certain terms, and sometimes
Yes.
service, and sometimes product, and sometimes
Yes.
right? So all these things we're
Yes.
talking about, we can't just rely on the word to define what this means.
That's where I'm going. I'm trying to unpack it
Yes.
to sort of use different words to clarify what we really mean by this stuff. Because one of the most interesting implications of the platform team pattern in team topologies is that you use the same product management techniques as a Streamline team would for somebody outside the organization. Think about how the Streamline teams think about their external customers. Those external customers don't have to have any loyalty to them. Like they could buy this thing or not. And so that has a sort of a focusing pattern to them. Like you have to deliver or they'll walk away. You don't always have that same relationship to the platform. The platform team, sometimes the Streamline teams inside an organization are told you will use this stuff, right? And so the platform teams, what I'm getting at is it seems like a lot of the value of the platform teams is the understanding that the Streamline teams don't have to use your stuff. Right, that provides the focus for the product management for the internal product.
Don't
platform.
have to or do have to?
Don't.
Let's see, and that's an interesting perspective because while I like the platform teams and Streamline teams, I don't believe that in an organization there's the option to we can or we may choose to follow these security processes and principles, and we may not. No.
Yeah.
This is what they're doing. Yes, they are still providing a service, the platform team, but it's not as if you can opt out and say, "Oh, I think we're going to go a different way."
Yeah.
Yeah. To use a metaphor, the Streamline teams are trains running on a track, and the platform teams are building the tracks. Like you are
Right.
kept on a certain course that has been set or determined by, let's call them the powers that be,
Yeah.
right? And they're setting course. They're figuring out where we're headed, and this is how we've decided to get there through our vast, big-headed thinking. And we've decided this is the course.
Yeah. So how do you have that focusing function on the platform teams in terms of how do they capture the work that the Streamline, how do they evolve the product that they provide for the Streamline teams, knowing that the Streamline teams are going to use whatever they provide no matter what, right? Is that an issue or is it just not an issue?
Well, okay, let's bend that metaphor a little. Your customers will use whatever you give them no matter what too. I mean, they can walk away. So in a sense, if you think
Blockbuster
of the
says no.
platform, if you think of, well, in a sense, think
No.
when we say we're customer focused, we want to be responsive to the customer. But up until now, hey, look at this product we've made. I'm sure it'll be very useful to you, customer. And the customer, if they find value, will use it, and they are customers, right? And then if they don't find it useful, they don't become customers. So your customer base is the people who found your product useful.
The
So
external
in a
customers
sense,
pay the company
yeah,
is what you're saying.
yeah. So in that sense, they are locked in. Now they could be wooed away. That's you could lose market share. That's why we do what we do, because we're trying to make sure that we're being responsive to keep their interest, to keep their involvement. So now we go back to our platform team. Their customer is not the end user.
Right.
Their customer is the internal teams. So
100%.
the internal team, like any stakeholder, will say, we have a need. Our product owner has given us this, and we have a need to do X. And the platform team takes a quick look at it and says, we do not have a plan to handle X. We need to do some research. Don't start on that yet. Right?
Yep.
And they go off and do their thing. Or they say, yes, that is exactly a problem we have already solved. In fact, don't even do that, because just use this instead. Right? For good or ill, right? The problem with platform aligned teams is they tend to stifle innovation within the stream teams.
Maybe.
Okay.
If there's conversation. So if you have
a two-way street?
Yeah,
with
exactly.
Architects?
I know. It's a weird concept. But in a traditional kind of hierarchical thing, top down, we've determined this is the direction you're going to go, and they give it to them, then if there's no give and take, then it does become a locking mechanism, and for better or for worse.
Yeah.
That locking mechanism may be something that is justified, but to your point, it may stifle innovation. So if there's a two-way conversation, however, where the streamline teams are saying, hey, but we need to do this because this is going to deliver value, greater value to our customer. We need to expand the boundaries. How can we do this? Not a matter of, well, we're not gonna follow your platform strategy. No, it's not like that, and it's not as if the platform folks are going to say you're going to do this and be damned if your customers don't like it. It's a conversation. Our customers need this. They want this. Technology is changing the way we interact, the way they interact with us, and our software is changing, and we need to expand those boundaries. Platform team, how can we do this? And maybe a Streamline team has some ideas on that, or maybe they don't, but they're trying to present, these are the needs that we've got, and they don't fit in the boundaries of the old way because your technology stack is, 10, 15 years old.
You need to evolve your internal product, and it needs to do what it does now, plus these other things. So please upgrade your internal product that you as a platform team you provide to us. Yeah, I guess so I'm not going to say mental models of leaders, but you have to set up that conversation, right? Because the anti-patterns are certainly possible, which is that this shared service team just says, this is how you do it.
Yeah, this is the way.
Yeah.
But do they work from a
backlog? The streamline team being able to walk away and not use it, that's going to be something that's going to be, more. Sorry, Mike, I cut you off.
Sorry. So does the platform team then organize around a backlog? Do they have a list of requests that get prioritized, and
it's a product team. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is all of that stuff works. And you've got all these patterns that you can just leverage that. You don't have to reinvent any wheels. You just point it at a different person internally.
So how often, now I totally agree. I totally agree that is a great model to follow. Why is it that nobody thinks of that? Not nobody, but why so few people think of that? Why do they look at the development teams and say, yes, we can understand why we have to make them teams? Sorry, I'm just being a little extra cynical there. I can understand why we have to form them into teams, but why can't they abstract that and say, and this platform, that would make a great team too, right? They look at it as, no, we need our architects to be freewheeling individuals who go forth and set right what once was wrong, and occasionally they meet together and they talk about what the chief architect would rather they were doing. I don't see them making that leap to the next tier.
Maybe it's inertia. They're used to working a certain way, and we tend to continue working the ways that we've been working. And so if they don't expand their minds to think that, this encompasses us as well. It's not unlike leadership. When I work with a lot of people in leadership, and the notion of them working together as a team, a team with a backlog? What? I'm not sure.
We're managers.
And
we
it's
manage.
Difficult. Right, and it can be a struggle for them to wrap their heads around that. And now I could be of the mindset that, you guys you're just not getting it. But it's in a more compassionate way. If I understand, this is how they've been. This is how they've been working. they've been working basically siloed, not as a team, as a leadership team, even though people throw that term around. The reality is they aren't frequently working as a team and collaborating. And so they don't have a common backlog or something like that. Now, there may have to be some loose affiliations. Maybe it's the backlog doesn't look exactly like, the backlogs of delivery teams, but there is still a backlog. And I think showing them the way, they may still have a hard time wrapping their head around it, but I think they begin to get it. But I think they're not used to working in that manner, and so it's a foreign concept.
Yeah, what they've been doing has worked well enough for them to stay in business and hire you. Like it's one of those things, you have to honor what people have been doing up to this point because it's gotten them promoted and bonus.
You got to meet them where they are. There's got to be. So how do you convince them that this is a justifiable change? Like what signal can you leverage and say, what you've been doing now is working great, but because I'm seeing X, Y, and Z, maybe you might consider this other thing.
Yeah.
Right. Or I'm seeing X, Y, and Z. Do you see that too? And might you think that is a questionable thing? What is X, Y, and Z? What is the thing that you could see that will trigger this thought process of we need to get the architects together under an umbrella?
Lack of movement on impediments. So there are impediments that bubble up from teams, or bottlenecks even. They're not always impediments. They may be bottlenecks that they've learned to live with. Well, that's going to be 6 weeks out. Why? Well, because we need an architect, and we only have so many architects, and so we build into our schedule that, we're not going to have an architect for 6 weeks. Well, why is that? I don't know. That's a bottleneck. And so they've learned to accept that bottleneck.
All right. So then you'd have to ask what might be. So now you say, now we have this bottleneck. Why? Because there's one architect assigned to this space, right?
Yes. And so how can we open up that bottleneck? Expand it a little bit more?
Opportunity for another architect to step in and fill that void, or to relieve that pressure in the backup.
There may be other people in the rest of the organization that have those abilities. There are opportunities to teach other people within the organization to expand that base. The point is, those impediments and bottlenecks if they're not able to be relieved by the team, that's the job of leadership. That is their job.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I can see where this has a cascade effect, because the architect of record is too busy to help. They're locked up on something else. They ask one of the other architects to step in. Those architects are like, well, this isn't my area, or I'm not familiar with where they are, so it's going to take me ramp up time to do that. So that might be justification. Well, how might you be able to keep all the architects on the same page about all the stuff that's going on? Maybe if they had a coming together, as it were, maybe an infrequent gathering in which they caught each other up on everything that they're working on. I don't know, maybe every day or so. They just or
come up with a term for that.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so
daily conversation.
Yeah, that would be a different. Okay, I had a thought, but it went away.
It went away. So to provide another answer, how do you do that? I think it's a combination of theory and data, right? So they have, and it could be data from other companies, it could be benchmarking, it could be referring them to all the studies and the surveys that we found of companies that work this way. But also I think Jeff's right, you want to combine it with the data of how it's going for them. in this pattern, because there's plenty of indications about how it's broken, and then sort of talked about like why it's broken, like what are the reasons that we can understand, the high work in process, the context switching. Like if you're relying on people to think together, to exercise creativity and judgment and subtle nuance and communication and collaboration, and you haven't given them the time, this is where I stop talking when I'm talking to clients. Because they can like, oh, okay, I get,
He froze.
Yeah, there's a point where they're like,
I was waiting with bated breath for you to complete that thought, and then you just and you even helped by not blinking for an extended period of time.
I'm hoping to get them to be like, oh, if I had 9 hairy problems a day, and I had to put 45 minutes into each one of those, that wouldn't work. So, like, what are the ways you want to get them, around? Because when I read the Team Topologies book, a lot of it comes down to cognitive load, right? The base reason of why this pattern doesn't work, but this one works better, is because people have you have not matched demand and capacity at the level of the brain. And so therefore it's not matched at the level of the system where the brains sort of, have their interactions around. That's essentially what I want to get to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's definitely taking things to a more granular level.
Well, yeah, it's because it's so frustrating to see people be like, we've got this system. Why doesn't this system? It's like looking at a car. I filled my car with milk. Why doesn't it go? It's like, well, how does the system work?
I went to the gas station. I checked what they had. Oh, they sell milk.
Yeah, exactly. It was much cheaper.
It's cheaper.
I don't understand why. What's the problem?
Not much.
You're not. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I went with the unleaded milk. So it was,
Guys, think about how this works. I don't want to drag you into the nerdy details, but like, people are trying to think, and they need more than 30 minutes to think on a thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I mean, I love where this is going. I totally agree that this is a good conversation to be having and something that we could replicate. The one thing you said that concerned me was people looking at patterns that have worked in other organizations. That's kind of what got us to a safe type world. So if we were to just airlift a team topology or a platform team structure from organization A and drop it into organization B and expect the exact same outcome, that might be an unwise expectation. You're basically, we're going to cargo cult our architecture team. We're going to make them act like that other one. So you still have to tailor the team to the organization that you have. So I just want to make sure that that's out there.
109%.
And not for you so much as the poor fools taking notes.
Yes, and also for the poor fools. That's why I drag people to the level of cognitive load, because like, you're absolutely right. You can't just install a thing. And so you're going to change it to the context. And so that's really what I'm trying to do, is give people a test they can run to see, the way that we've applied these concepts, does it work or not? Well, do people have time to think about what you asked them to solve? If yes, you're going in the right direction. If not, you're just cargo culting, like you said.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And arguably, not to defend any particular methodology or whatever, but
you couldn't. There's just no way.
I mean, the fact is, any of the disciplines can be plopped in as, okay, you need to do Scrum. Time out. Let's understand, what in the heck are you trying to accomplish and what's going on right now? How are you working, before we just prescribe Scrum or Kanban or SAFe or whatever. Let's do this scaling methodology. Do you even need to scale? And so before you even get there, that whole thing, you could say that, plopping one solution, I guess you can call it a solution, from what worked in one organization, which is debatable, into another organization, and that's, the whole SAFe thing. But I think you could say that about just about any of the disciplines as well. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of places they've plopped project management methodology. They've installed it on top of a inherently unpredictable process,
A project
which is the
problem,
problem
I
made by
dare say
3S.
mental model.
I'm not going to say that. I can't. God, I wish we'd stop saying mental model. But it's the same pattern, right? It's just, yeah, you're trying to hammer
It's the
stuff.
mental
That's
model
not
show.
men's. Maybe that's what we should do.
So, okay, so let's go back to nuts and bolts. We've got this platform team. We've identified that we have a need or a benefit that we could derive from having a unified conversation around the platforms to provide cross functionality and load balancing of those platform people to the stream-aligned teams, right? Does that make sense? All right. What model do they follow to work through their stuff? Do we suggest a Scrum model and say you're going to work on a cadence, or do we make that more of a flow-based process? Because as a service team, they have a high incidence of emergency calls that they need to be responsive to.
Do they?
I'm gonna say it depends. How predictable do you want your architectural runway to be? How much do you have architectural level fire drills? Right? It's a really
It's
bad
not
sign
just
to me.
architects. In your platform team that you described, there's other things that security, architecture, there's other roles. Or are you thinking each of those is a separate?
Well,
Or
so
is
I'm
each?
thinking about it in terms of the product. So the platform team exists to provide a certain product, and so I would guess in a large organization, that would be security, or it would be data, or it might be CI/CD tools, and so. But you're sort of at the level, I don't want to say primitives, but low level stuff that should be really stable, I would think. And so hopefully your security process isn't breaking often enough to the extent that you need a real quick fix to your security or your version control. So I would hope that you could run it in a predictable kind of scrummish. I mean, if you need the flow based optionality to interrupt that stuff, then do that. But hopefully that, I mean, over time you'd want to move to more stability is the way I would think about it. Is that crazy?
Well, I mean, if you think, go on, Jeff.
I might slightly debate you on that, Matt. I think from a database perspective, some of the other common structures, yes. But from a security perspective, it is quite dynamic. We're getting threats every day. I mean, threats coming at us constantly. And so it's all a security team can do to keep up. And so that is, very emergent. And so, there may be lulls, ebbs, but then there are these big waves of, they're getting all this, these attacks and 0-day attacks, and they look different. And so that can change very dynamically and in a big swell, almost a tsunami of stuff. So, but yeah, the rest of the stuff I think is probably much more predictable, at least if you're trying to think ahead.
So what I hear you saying is it depends on what the product is. So if it's security is the product that you're providing the streamline teams, you want that more flow based, but something like a COBOL system that's existed for 3 decades that has to be right and can't go down, maybe they can plan that stuff.
Well, you're going to have something you plan no matter what, right? I think like if you're going to have a security focused platform team, there's going to be security initiatives. We're going to be rolling the organization over to Windows 11, or we're going to be switching from this type of VPN to this other type of VPN, right? So there's planned work that they would have to make room for, that they need to make sure that they're keeping the organization flowing on. The operational stuff, think about the reason that we even have this platform team in the first place. This is a limited pool of people who the feature teams don't have representation of that skill set. So we had to pool those limited folks into a group that could serve the feature teams, because we don't have enough of them to go around, so every feature team gets their own. And even if and that's just one model. I think even if you did have enough to go around, you'd still have a higher level platform team to keep watch over the larger initiatives.
Yeah.
So okay, so what we're talking now is a service or is an operations team, right? They're trying to keep the flow of good planning and good platform, while at the same time being responsive to the rest of the organization for ad hoc requests, or even planned requests, right? The platform team isn't the one that's putting the software out in the world. It's the feature teams putting the software out in the world. These guys are just making sure that it goes out there in a deterministic way or a extensible, manageable way. So I think they're almost guaranteed to have a component of planned work mixed with responsive work. And so Scrum's not a great fit depending on the urgency of those responses they have to make. But Kanban may not be the best fit for keeping the long-term stuff going. So what's in between? Do we put them in a hybrid model?
At some point, it's angels dancing on the head of a pin. I mean, Scrum is more predictable, but it's not like you can't swap stuff out, and Kanban is more flexible, but it's not like you don't have a plan or potentially could build a roadmap against it. So it's kind of like 51% more time boxing versus flow is like, at a certain point, it's like, we've got the accountabilities and the mechanisms, no matter what, to accommodate what you need. And so it's like, it's not really black and white, I guess is what I'm saying.
Jeff, thoughts?
It makes me think about kind of a concept that I've been beating the drum for a little while, and it's build your own agile discipline. And I know it would probably it's heresy to some, but we've done Scrum, we've done Kanban, we've done a number of other things, XP, and I mean even Scrum and XP have become so much intertwined that people think, oh yeah, well that's Scrum. Well, no, actually it came from XP. Huh? Oh, and the point being that what are the things that work, and some of them come from Scrum, some come from Kanban, some come from XP. And if you're building your own, maybe it's a Scrum-Bani, like you said, a hybrid model, and it could be a Kanban-y kind of Scrum-Ban, or it could be a more Scrummy kind of, and it would depend on what is the need, what's best adapted for this particular team or this particular organization.
Yeah, so I mean, and to not go down that path would be to risk the cargo cult response. Well, in this company, it was a 50-50, so I should drop a 50-50 in that one.
Precisely.
Right? You need to balance and say what's working best for you. Yeah.
And I think it's incumbent upon us as coaches to help guide them the right way to choose what's going to work for their situation versus just dropping, oh, I'm a this person, so this is what, hey, if that's the only tool you got, so if I'm a hammer, I got a hammer, well, that's what I know how to do. Well, it's not going to work very well to fix your TV well, I don't know, maybe it would. But so when we're trying to fix organizations or help guide them, it helps to have multiple tools in your chest, but also know when and where to use those.
You have to. Ultimately, we're getting better at delivery by doing this and by helping other people do it, right? That's the basic framing of the manifesto. Mm-hmm. And so that does not equal to me. I don't think it's possible to arrive with one tool, right? Or to demand that you use it this way. It's really like, make sure they understand, here's the theory that explains the data that we keep getting, but instrument yourself, start getting the metrics immediately and then try stuff out. And if it works better, congratulations, you're a thought leader. Like literally, you know?
This is making me think we we often discuss fractal representations of teams and higher orders within the organization, and within every Scrum team or every feature team, you've got a representation of the people who do the work, you got a representation of the people who define the work, and you got a representation of the people who coordinate the work, right? So that would be team members, product owners, scrum masters. One of our more favored scaling models that we tend to lean more toward, because it's a little bit less intrusive, is Scrum at Scale.
Oh.
Or less, but Scrum at Scale specifically. And the reason I'm thinking about this is it's got those two interlocking rings. It's got the Scrum Master cycle, it's got the product owner cycle. And whenever I looked at that, I always felt like there was something missing. Like the fractal isn't there. Like there is no technology ring.
Oh, I remember talking about this years ago. Yeah, there should be an architect sync.
Yeah. And so then that, or a platform. Maybe it's not the architect. Maybe it's the platform on which this stuff exists.
Let me make I don't know if I'm advocating for the devil here or not. Boy, I should get clear on that. But isn't the architecture? Couldn't you think of that as being part of the product owner cycle? Because it's half of the what we're gonna do.
Sure, but the product owner cycle is really aimed at the marketing. It's all the businessy side of stuff. I don't think if we look at the product owner cycle, there's anything in there that could be construed as architecture.
Well, but maybe that's where you plug that hole, right? Because just like if you're in epic refinement, you want somebody from the business to talk about value and viability, and you want somebody from the product design to talk about usability. And Josh smiling, he knows where I'm going with this. And you want somebody from the architecture to talk about how.
Sure,
you isn't it the same conversation, but in an ongoing?
So here's the problem: is usually in that model, you don't allow stakeholders on the Scrum Master side of the circle. They intersect through the product owner at the points where the ring intersects, at backlog and at demo.
Are you thinking of an architect as somebody from the Scrum Master side of the circle?
No, I think it's a new circle. I think platform is an independent circle that intersects the other two somewhere. It feeds into the backlog of stuff, but it also feeds into the doing of the technology of stuff.
I think the admin overhead would be more costly than what you would get by slotting that person into but that's just where I'm at right now. Jeff, you have something to say.
So this is really interesting. Couple things. I'm curious. So if you think about a product from the business side, can it exist without the platform? I mean, and can it exist in delivering value to the customer without the platform?
I think if it can, you should get rid of the platform. I think you're paying too much for this muffler.
Probably.
Well, well, and maybe what we're running into is that any of these scaling models are not. You don't always need the rigor of the big ring, right? When you have a understandable enough product, you don't need the product owner cycle. Just a person can fill that role.
Totally.
Right. But when the stakeholder sources become overwhelming, when all the research work becomes when all this other stuff happens, then you expand that circle out, create the executive meta scrum to really watch over all that other stuff. Right. So, but that's at need. You don't just establish that pattern. It's only when you get to the point where you need that level. And I've run into a lot of situations where they've attempted to do just islands of product ownership, and they're expanding all these teams, and then they've got no unified way. And they keep trying to say, like, I keep hearing terms. Remember when we were working at that one joint, they kept saying, what was that term? Two in a box? This concept that there was a mixture of technology and business product ownership, right? It was two people.
That's kind of the pattern I'm advocating for, though, because if you think about how these conversations get made or the decisions get made, somebody asks the product person, hey, we need to do this, we need to change this. The first question should be, are there any implications to the systems and capabilities that we'll need to build on to make this happen? If so, that needs to inform the decision about prioritization or yes or no.
Yeah. But the problem with
building
two in
those
a
into the
box,
existing conversation, I think, is more efficient than having another architecture, like another part of the system. That's all I'm
well,
saying.
so the wisdom of the one product owner concept is you've got a single voice directing things. Once you get to two in a box, now you got a mom and dad situation. You got a potential for
Totally.
conflict between those two things, and the team can hide behind the disagreements between the two layers.
Yeah, I would. I would not.
Right.
So the two equal decision makers in a box. I
Yeah.
don't think that. I think it should be the product person's decision, informed by. But everybody should see the architectural input that goes into that to understand.
Sure. And yeah,
But
absolutely.
one decision maker for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with two in a box is a short trip to three, and then why not four?
Right.
Right. It's like, well, there was a reason. There was a reason that we had technology represented. There was a reason we had business represented. Well, what about, I don't know, user interface? Why don't we have a UI UX?
And that's a hard
Right.
pattern to instantiate some places, which is why you get the 2, 3, 4 in a box. And so we're sort of pushing against
Right.
that because that's hard. It's hard to get to one decision maker, but it's so fast and efficient. Like you want to encourage them to, yeah.
So my thought is, if you're getting to that point where you've got a bunch of competing drivers, then you form the product owner circle, and they become a council of stakeholders advising the one voice of product ownership that's coming in. Totally get that. But I also don't want to see the architects, who are stakeholders of a sort, but I don't want them bogged down in the product discussions. They've got different fish they're frying, right?
Jeff has a
However,
thing.
again, if the platform is part of the product because it's a delivery mechanism or whatever, then how is that not part and parcel with the product? And so if that's the case, then, and I'm going to cite an example here in a minute, but if that's the case, then how do you separate them? And justifiably, shouldn't architecture be part of that conversation? Let me tell you a story. There was a company that
Settle
they
in.
had a product, and they were busy building some really cool features for a new client. Actually, it was an existing client, but whole new stuff. And they had a slew of stuff that they were building. And the problem was they were building it on old architecture. And at a certain point, all that old architecture was actually constraining their ability to deliver new, advanced, and really cool features, because it's like, I don't know how we're going to do this. And are we going to do this on the old code base? I mean, the code base is 15 years old. And so architecture, and even the business recognized there is value in advancing our platform and our architecture, because we can't continue to build cool whiz-bang stuff on this old rickety stuff. It's just not working.
Yep.
Or when it does work, it's prone to breaking, or it's causing our teams to go through all these gyrations just to make it work.
It's a constraint.
Yeah, but I think I love their story. I think the key phrase in there was business recognized. The business recognized the platform was not up to snuff. I can counter your story with yet another story of an organization in which the platform was rickety and business did not want to spend the money to upgrade that infrastructure. It may have been an airline that some of us were familiar with around Christmas time. Now, the point
Could have been
being,
several airlines that
yes,
we were familiar with. Among
but the
many
point
others.
being, or any bank, COBOL. So any
Yep.
organizational structure could become complex enough or have enough constraints that the one model doesn't fit. So I think maybe what I'm envisioning with this extra platform ring is the organization that has become more complex than just having architectural representation in the product owner conversation. You definitely need that. But just like you need product conversation in with the technology teams or the scrum cycle of the team, right? You need the product input in that, but you don't need the product owner day by day writing code with people, right? There's the product owner concerns, there's the developmental concerns, and then there's the platform concerns. And if the platform concerns can be represented by a small group of people, you don't need the big ring. But if the platform becomes so widespread, so complex, there are many directions we're going in. There are things that we want to be able to identify as potential directions we could take this. Like we're going to switch over to from AWS to Azure. We're going to or vice versa, right? Product isn't going to love that conversation. They're not going to find value in that conversation. It's a lot of technical experimentation. The platform team could do that stuff independent of and then come back with their results. So I think you're imagining a simpler case, and I'm imagining a more complex case.
So I think there's not one, but it's building a solution, if you will, that's fit for purpose. And so there seems to be in large organizations this rush to, okay, let's implement the scaling structure. Stop. I don't care whether it's Scrum at scale, I don't care what it is. Before you get there, you don't need to scale. Scale when you need to. And so to your point, maybe that platform team, that platform recognition is something that can live within the product owner cycle if you're doing Scrum at scale. But then at some point, maybe it does grow to the point where you need something larger. Now, I'm always a little skeptical about adding more structure, because it's like then you just replicate some bureaucracy, or you reshape it into a different kind of bureaucracy, but it's still bureaucracy nonetheless.
Yeah.
Which adds
Building that
constraints.
ring. Well, your bureaucracy was what, anytime you scale an agile effort, at Scrum team level, there's almost zero bureaucracy. And then the bigger your organization gets, the more bureaucracy may creep into the system. And that's when people start looking to scale.
Right. And I'm okay with that as long as it pays for itself, right? I mean, you can't have people uncoordinated. You need just enough coordination, right, to make sure that you get the right people doing the right things at the right time, but no more. Right.
So consider this. And Mike, you said something that sparked something in my brain.
I saw it right there.
You said typically business doesn't see the value of a lot of the technical platformy sort of stuff. And I would argue that they can if it's communicated to them what is the value. And so if you don't, as an architect, if you're not communicating to the business, hey, there is value in moving to the cloud, and you can convey that in dollars and cents,
Throughput accounting,
which is the way business. I mean, they respond to dollars and cents because that's what they're all about. You can do that if you want to. Now, does it take some more work? Yes, absolutely it takes more work. But this is how you move together as an organization. You've got people that are coneheads, us natural coneheads, that think from a technical perspective. But we have to put our business hat on top of that conehead for a moment and say, these are the dollars and cents. These are the economics of moving to the cloud, or whatever it happens to be. And make the business case for why we need to incorporate more advances in technology for this platform if you want to grow this product any further.
Wearing a business hat on top of a cone head makes it really tedious to get through airport security, but I know what you're saying. This is why I think the best way to think about it is to think about the what and how and the tech and the usability as accountabilities. that exist in the team level, regardless of what the team is or who the product is, or not that you won't need all of this. If you're a platform team and you're providing APIs for data, maybe there's not much usability there. I mean, I would think about your developer experience, right? And how shitty it is to use the APIs that you're providing them. That could definitely impact your speed and your quality. But, there may be more or less in consideration for all of these accountabilities in a particular team. But if you thought about them and made sure that you haven't neglected them, then you're flexible in terms of the forms of what you do, how you instantiate them. Yeah. Does that make sense?
The thing that keeps coming to mind in Jeff's vision there, and I agree, in a perfectly functioning product environment, your product people will be responsive to a technical business case that can demonstrate value. I have seen way too many organizations that are not made up of perfectly functioning product organizations. They're made up of flawed people with egos who do not respond to other people's ideas.
I refuse to work with flawed people. Flawed people are right out. I am not going anywhere near that.
And so all I'm saying is, if we could get them to that evolved state where they're willing to consider the value and the throughput accounting and all that other stuff, that's great. But you're not always going to get that soon enough in a transformation. There's going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth and things, and it's going to take some, I hate to say, explosion to get everyone's attention to say, maybe we should be doing this. And it sucks that sometimes it takes a disaster to drive change. It's like you don't get the stop sign at the intersection until there's been so many accidents there.
But
right.
But at some point, if you ask a business person, look, do you want $10 or do you want $5? Like, you can rely. No, you think they'll ask for $5 instead of $10?
No, because they're not going to. They won't see the link. You can try, right, but they won't necessarily see the link. Right? They see the vision of what they've dreamt up for the world. And if you were to say, well, we can't give you that dream without this technology, that's one thing. They'll buy into that because that's enabling their thing. But now you're talking about maintenance on existing systems. Like, why can't it's working now? Why do we have to invest dollars in you giving me something that does the exact same thing?
So it's a storytelling challenge is what I hear you saying.
It can be, right? Yeah. And so all I'm saying is, maybe if you get that resistance point, maybe you need
totally
something that will drive that in a recognizable way.
That's why I have been wanting to talk about throughput accounting in more detail. Like, how do you set up that conversation? How do you make those calculations in a way that are transparent and compelling for people? Because at the end of the day, business people are rational. They're not crazy. They want to do the right thing. It's just they don't see it the same way. And so how do you set up that conversation? So obviously everybody wants $10 more than $5. It would be crazy to do anything else. Like, how do you get to that point, I think?
Right.
Is what I hear you asking.
The question we're having, though, isn't a question of $5 versus $10. It's your $10 or my $10. It's like, I can get us $10. I can get us $10 too. I can get us $10 and we get new stuff. You're giving me $10 and it's old stuff. I don't need that. The customer doesn't see that. We don't.
Well, exactly. So, but Mike, so that's what I'm saying. You can't. They won't be equally valuable to the business, right? At some point, you need one final.
You would hope.
So we need more clarity around how we. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
No, well, I don't think it's my $10 versus your $10. Again, and these aren't perfect situations. They're never perfect situations. If they were perfect, we wouldn't ever even be in those situations. They would have worked it out themselves. The reality, though, is that if you have any vision as a business person for the future of your product, if you had a crystal ball and you knew that your product, while it's at its high point right now, was going to die on the vine in less than a year because the technology is changing, you would be really ticked to be on the downside of that curve, and nobody told you oh, crap, we can't extend this any further? I just promised this customer all these whiz-bang features.
Exactly.
What do you mean we can't deliver that? Well,
right.
because
So
our
now
technology is old.
the conversation becomes, so now instead of this guaranteed money from that customer for some whiz-bang feature, you're telling me we have to not give him that. And at the end of your action, I'm going to be right where I am today. Maybe it'll live longer. It'll be more extensible. But from the customer's perspective, nothing changed. And that's where the conflict comes in. That's where they don't see. So you might have been raising the alarm all along. They say, we're coming to an end of life on this thing. And they're like, yeah, but we don't need to do that today. Whiz bang. Let's get the features. Whiz. Let's do whiz. Let's do bang. Woo.
That very much happens a lot.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And then suddenly something happens. All of a sudden Microsoft goes, oh, by the way, we're end of lifing this, or we've come up with another thing, or there's this, or AWS goes and finds a vulnerability that they need to shut down a certain service that you're relying. All of a sudden, all bets are off. Everybody's going nuts and going, oh, crap, now we have to do the technology thing, and you don't have a choice. And the product people are never happy when that happens because they don't want to think about that.
Maybe the way to frame this is to say,
maybe
so
it's just
multiple,
the ones that I dealt with. So
yeah, I think we've met the same people, at least at a certain level. But maybe the way to think about this is to frame it like, okay, there's multiple futures that lie ahead of you, right? And in one of them, this happens, and in one of them, this happens, and in one of them, this happens. And the choices you make like, I would love to not have to pay for health insurance, right? And in the future where nothing bad happens to me, that's a net gain, right? There's a future where I get into a bad car accident and I have to declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So I've made a decision that the most prudent way, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but like capping the downside risk and enabling the maximum sort of value creation, like maybe that's a way to think about it. Like, oh, you could go down this path, but just keep in mind the risk that you're taking. Some random Saturday, this whole thing falls over and all of this whiz bang is dead, right? And if that's what you want to do, owner of the business, it's your business, right? Or you can hedge some of that risk over here, and here's how to do that. Maybe that's a way to give it to them. Because I'm all for people making their choices. I'm just super skeeved out when I feel like people don't understand all the implications of their choices, right? That's the part that bugs me. So multiple possible futures might be a way to frame it. And what each one of those would, how you'd want to optimize your choices for each one of those, because they could. I mean, a 13% chance of something happening doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Like we learned that in a couple cycles ago in presidential. Like shit happens.
Not to get political.
Not to make it political, but that was a good example of like everybody was sure what was going to happen, and then something completely different happened, and it totally broke a lot of people's models. For what to do. That was probably unnecessary. Anyway, statistically speaking, you really want to make sure you understand what all the possibilities are and how to.
Yeah.
And there's changeability there too. I mean, because if you're a 20-year-old, the chances that you're going to have an issue with, a chronic disease may be much less. However, on the other hand, you're at a higher risk for a motorcycle accident because you ride motorcycles, and so it's variable.
There's a whole insurance industry built around that.
Exactly, and that's why, man, that's the one thing I do like about, one of the very few things I like about the insurance industry is that they actually gather data and they base things on reality. This is the current situation, statistically speaking.
And if they screw it up, they go out of business.
Right, exactly.
Or they drop the insured. Like, we had to pay out. Now you're no longer insurable.
They don't get the business outcome they hope for, right? It makes a difference.
So, I don't want to get into the ethics of the insurance industry.
That's fine. We won't go down that road.
But
totally. But again, so this might look different for a startup than it does for a Fortune 500 company.
It should, and it should.
It should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everything we're talking about at some point, there's some between a startup and a Fortune 500. There's many layers, and there's many levels of complexity, and we've seen many of them. Like they're not. You don't always mirror the entire corporate structure at the middle-sized company, but if you're not careful, you're going to, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
a lot of the stuff we're talking about, obviously, there are flavors of organizations at which the simpler model works, just out of the box. We don't have to get, and even the mid-range stuff. But when you get into a super, your architecture mirrors the complexity of your organization.
Totally.
So anyway,
Yeah, this was great. So I don't know how many.
I feel as though we have reached a natural end point in this conversation. How about you?
I do as
Beat
well. It's
the
11:11.
proverbial dead horse, or we beat it to death.
Yes, we can stop that.
No animals or horses were harmed in this.
But we tortured the fuck out of some metaphors, didn't we?
As
I will. Has this been this Agile thing? I feel like this has been this Agile thing.
This has definitely been this Agile thing.
That might be.
I'm Mike Markey.
And I'm Jeff Singleton.
I'm going to hit
Bye,
stop.
everybody.